Story 1. They are a novelty, and it is fun to see something from the past that is still alive today, like a walking museum. Keeping some old traditions alive is a good way to remember where we came from. Humanity's collective memory is short. If we forget the problems of the past, we are doomed to repeat them. Maintaining the monarchy in its current state protects us from a future absolute monarch coming to power, like a monarchy vaccine. That, in my opinion, is the best argument for keeping the monarchy. They are like declawed kittens that protect us from getting eaten by a lion. Story 2. I find myself about to ask this, and then I turn the spotlight back on myself and remember someone could ask me why I care about a college sports program or a professional basketball or football player. Everyone has their thing. Live and let live. Story 3. From a British perspective, I think they are good for international relations. They seem to exist outside of politics, and even if a country dislikes our prime minister, they do not always dislike the royal family. They bring in a significant amount of money. Visit Britain estimates around £500 million, but this should be taken with caution. The Crown Estate contributed £1.1 billion to the Treasury last year and £4 billion over the past 10 years. 15% of that amount then goes back to them as the sovereign grant, which some people mistakenly believe is taxpayer money. Ultimately, they are quintessentially British, and we do appreciate a bit of pomp and ceremony. Story 4. I like looking at pictures of hats. I think they are funny. We do not really have a hat culture here. Story 5. Everyone loves gossip. The current royal family is somewhat boring, but back in the 1980s and 1990s it was wild. There were extravagant weddings, royal births, and photos of Princess Diana taking the princes out in public. There was royal fighting, affairs, and Sarah Ferguson having her toes sucked. Prince Charles wrote down that he would like to be a tampon, so he could never leave Camilla's vagina. It was crazy. Story 6. Just my culture. It has always been and always will be my whole life. I will not lie, it is a bit harder now that Elizabeth has passed. Story 7. Without them, our prime minister would be a president, effectively our king or queen, which means over the last decade we would have had, among others, King David Cameron, King Boris Johnson, Queen Liz Truss, King Rishi Sunak, King Keir Starmer, and next up King Nigel Farage. The royals are a massive part of our history, important figureheads for the military, an often overlooked boost to our overseas standing, not to mention a key part of the tourism industry, and a crucial check on the sorts of useless, self-serving politicians we seem determined to keep electing. Story 8. I like the Thai monarch because he enjoys wearing unusual crop tops and appointed his dog as the head of the Air Force. It is a perfect example of how ridiculous hereditary power can be. Story 9. As someone who loves history, you would be shocked at how much of the country's history is tied to the royal family and places. You can see the entire growth of a nation by looking at how the royals lived, who they knighted, how they made the laws, and so on. It is like religion. You do not have to be a devout Catholic to know that even if religion has done some terrible things, awe-inspiring things have also come out of religion that even the most steadfast atheist would be amazed by. Story 10. They remind my prime minister that he is not the highest in the land. The monarch does not do much, but they are not as expensive as everyone thinks, especially not to Canada, and they are great for humbling the members of parliament. Story 11. The royal family is an anachronism in the 21st century. It is fairy tale nonsense. If you were starting a new nation, you would never have a hereditary monarch as head of state. It would be ridiculous. But we have one, and it kind of works. I live in the United Kingdom. The monarch is a figurehead with no real political power. Yes, they live in luxury, but their lives are completely dedicated to serving the country, like living in a gilded prison. They are above party politics and have no allegiances to specific interest groups. Imagine the further division an elected president would cause to our already beleaguered political system. President Tony Blair? President Boris Johnson? They would be actively hated by at least 50% of the populace. The royals are also a link to our history and a symbol of the nation in a way that no other individual or group could ever be. I am not saying I care about them at all, but they do not cause me too much bother either. Maybe get rid of a few of the minor ones, sell off a few palaces, and make them pay their own way a bit more. Story 12. Because it is the culture and tradition I was born into, You care about it the same way Mexicans care about nachos, the way the French care about onions, or the way Americans care about guns. Some things do not need to make sense. Story 13. My mom thinks their kids are cute, and she definitely had a fantasy when I was growing up that I could marry into a royal family and basically be Kate Middleton or Meghan Markle. She is a little more disillusioned with royalty now because of Meghan and Harry's situation and drama. Story 14. I'm not sure if I really care about them, but I think they are a net positive for the United Kingdom, assuming that is the royal family you are referring to. I think they provide cultural and historical continuity, philanthropy, patronage of the arts, architecture, and agriculture, as well as nonpartisan leadership. As a citizen of a country where the leadership provides none of these things, I think the United Kingdom and its territories are lucky to have the royal family. Story 15. Scottish here. I'm absolutely no flag-waving, public cheering, or fanboying member of the British public when it comes to the outdated and archaic institution of the British royal family, but I was sad when the Queen died. It's not for the reasons you might think. The Queen was always there since I was born, and she had become more than just a person within British culture. She had become an institution in her own right. Then she was gone. Combine that with the massive upheaval we had in the United Kingdom over COVID, and it just added to the national confusion. It was colossal change compounded. She not only lived through World War II but made, albeit brief, an effort in the non-combat military for a few months in 1945 to show her defiance against the Nazis, and she was just a kid. How many people could have pointed to a 21st century figurehead within their own country and said that? She was a connection to the past, to days when people showed tremendous courage for the sake of courage and standing up against evil. Now many people tend to only stand in front of their phone cameras and rant for the approval of strangers. Once Charles dies, I think the royal family should be considerably scaled down, with a goal of phasing it out over the next decade or two. Can't be done overnight, not in a civilized way. Story 16. I live in Sweden. We have a constitutional monarchy, which consists of a symbolic royal family and a democratically elected parliament that makes the actual decisions. Think of the royal family as celebrities who do not seek drama or crave attention. They mostly work with charities, diplomacy, and various symbolic gestures and traditions. Out of all countries in Europe, the Swedish king is the lowest paid reigning monarch and has the least amount of power. The monarchy's power is gradually limited over time. In the 1900s, the king's ability to grant titles was reduced so that his children only inherit symbolic titles with no real power. Now, only the main line of the family receives titles moving forward. The royal family in Sweden is extremely well loved and quite relaxed. As a Swedish citizen, you can even send them emails and may receive a response. I have done this myself, sharing about my autism and how I found it difficult to make friends. The Chamberlain sent me a message in response, and a week later, one of the royals spoke about autism in their charity for neurodivergence, using some of the exact words I had used. They listen and try to use their influence to help us. They are royalty, but they are not rulers. Story 17. Because I am curious to see what those lazy people are doing with our hard-earned tax money. Because, yes, they basically live off government assistance. Story 18. I don't know, the same reason anyone admires celebrities and forms parasocial relationships with people on Twitter and Instagram. Story 19. It depends on what you mean by care. I do think the monarchy has a benefit for smaller countries. There has been concern in the past about smaller countries being at risk. Being part of the Commonwealth gives smaller countries some protection. Also, I know there are discussions about treaties and treaty rights. One part of the discussion is about what happens if we are no longer attached to Britain. It is too complicated for me to get into here. I personally do not think we need a monarchy, but I do believe in stability. If the monarchy or the connection influences world stability, then I do care. Story 20. I think it is curious how a group of people could shed any remnants of humanity to act toward a family unit in such a cold and corporate way. With every glimpse we get of them, it seems stranger and stranger to me, and I cannot comprehend how it came to be this way. Honestly, I wish anthropologists of the 20th century had chosen to conduct a prolonged ethnographic study of royal families across the world to see if there are substantial cultural shifts between them, and to compare notes with all the ethnographic research already done about tribal or developing societies to try to identify at what point the disconnect begins and how culture can suppress paternal and maternal instincts. Obviously, no royal family would give an anthropologist the access required to do any meaningful case study, but it would be fascinating to read about. I find it far more interesting than how the Romani or Samoans operate. Story 21. I don't know why either. The royal family has no authority or head of state. They should no longer be paid. Story 22. Do not care about distant relatives of my grandmother. Keep a cautious eye on all wealthy and influential people, so one knows when to avoid trouble. Story 23. Tourism generates significant revenue for the British royal family, which directly supports employment opportunities. Story 24. I have been wondering this ever since Diana died. Many people were deeply affected by it. Why? I mean, if you are from England, then okay. But in the United States, why did you care about her at all? Story 25. People see them as living symbols of national identity. I do not personally care, but I understand why it matters to some. Story 26. I find the concept of royalty in the modern world interesting. No longer do most people believe the royal families derive their power from God. I also wonder what it must be like to be the heir to the throne. When do they realize that they will never be able to pursue what truly interests them, such as being a veterinarian or a dancer? What kind of shock is it to the system, and how do they come to terms with that? If I were unfortunate enough to be born into a royal family, I would want to be a cousin or the fifth child so I could have a chance at a relatively normal life. Story 27. I don't particularly care about them or the monarchy in general, but I do feel some of them are basically very decent people who do what they can from their position of privilege. Charles is well into environmental issues and actually made a speech about the dangers of plastic way back in about 1973 before anyone had even thought about it. The tabloids wrote him off as the eccentric prince. William seems to be doing some great work regarding mental health issues, and obviously Kate is now able to promote cancer research from a very personal point of view. Story 28. It is beautiful to see them preserve history and tradition. Royal families are possibly the only families who have such great record-keeping of their ancestors and relatives, as well as documenting how their families have influenced history. It is nice to be able to witness these marvelous ceremonies and events, especially coming from a country that does not have anything like them. Story 29. I find it a cool thing that makes Britain a little bit unique and special. I love all the ceremony and history behind it as well. I am a huge history enthusiast, so maybe that has something to do with it. Story 30. Because I have served in the military of a Commonwealth country for 16 years now, I have served both the Queen and now the King. I care because of the shared history that it brings to mine and others in this family of nations. To be clear, however, I do not care about any of the celebrity or pageantry that comes with it. Story 31. As someone who is a Republican, but lives in a country with a monarchy, for most people it is a parasocial relationship. They are so used to seeing and reading about the royals, and many people get invested in their lives. I have always thought it was strange, especially when it comes to royal children. Why do we save photos of kids we do not know but believe we know so much about? I would also say it is another form of celebrity culture and worship. People who follow royals watch them in the same way celebrity followers watch their favorites. They follow the outfits, sightings, and other details just like people do with celebrities. When I ask royalists why they like the monarchy, many of them say it is a mixture of tradition and admiration for the glamour. Story 32. The day the Queen died, a student at my school heard about it and said she was like a grandmother to me, even though he had never met her. Strange person. I am glad I never have to talk to him again. Story 33. The Queen was a great check for her prime ministers. She held them accountable, and they were quite intimidated by her. Charles might not hold the same gravitas, but he can with time. They also contribute more to tourism than what they spend in a year. They are a great conversation piece in terms of British history. Not many families can trace their lineage and history as far back as the royals. Story 34. I suppose I have stopped caring without realizing. Various scandals meant they used to be in the news, but now those seem largely manufactured and meaningless. Even though I have dealt with members of the royal family in the past due to working for charities they were patrons of, I have now lost my knowledge of them over time through indifference. I still get surprised when Charles is referred to as the King and William as the Prince of Wales. I am vaguely aware that William and Harry have children but have no idea how many or what their names are. Story 35. Because looking around the world, what we have now seems better than many alternatives. I do not revere the monarch, but Charles seems to perform a useful constitutional and diplomatic role. Some of the hangers-on are a bit of a pain, but William, Catherine, and seem actually productive in terms of national pride. So I do not follow the gossip, but I do not feel a need to fix what seems to work adequately. Story 36. I respect history and tradition. I think it holds important meaning for a culture. Also, the crown adds a lot to the economy. Story 37. I am a British patriot and grew up under Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. She was the best queen ever. She embodied everything good about my country. I served my country as a civil servant and took a personal oath of loyalty to her. I was in floods of tears when she died. I felt like I had lost my own grandmother. I do not feel the same about King Charles, so it was a very personal loyalty to Queen Elizabeth. Aside from the individuals, I am a strong monarchist. Monarchy is a very stable form of statehood because it separates the daily power, that is, the prime minister, from the soul of the nation, the monarch. If the prime minister were ever to act irrationally, the monarch can overrule him. That rarely happens in modern times, but the power remains. Story 38. I know two of them personally through university, and they are upstanding individuals who genuinely care for others and the country at large. From what I can tell, they are also disgusted and wholly embarrassed by Andrew. Story 39. They are an important part of our heritage and the reason many people like to visit our country. Story 40. I always thought Harry was attractive, and I still cannot believe he actually married a black American woman. It just was not me. Admiring him is honestly the extent of my interest. Story 41. As an American, I did not care about the British or any other royal family until Queen Elizabeth died. That hit unexpectedly hard. She had been the Queen of England since before I was born, so she felt like a fixed point in the world that would never change until it did. It was strange. I still do not care about any royal family, but I do miss the stability that Queen Elizabeth represented just a little. The rest of them can go away. Story 42. I do because I am British and our royal family is a British tradition. They contribute to the economy, not as some would have it, are a drain on the taxpayer, and are an attractor for tourism. Story 43. I wouldn't say I care, but as an uninformed American, I think they are a neat fixture for the United Kingdom, and personally, I think Kate is classically beautiful like nobody else I have ever seen. I fully understand the idea of tax waste and similar concerns. It's just not my tax money, so I don't care. I know when I visited the United Kingdom as a kid, my parents took us to many places related to the royal family. If they disappeared, I bet all those places would still be there, though, to be fair. Maybe less fun. Not sure. Story 44. I met the Prince of Qatar by accident. He thought I was Egyptian. We were chatting and smoking. I realized he wasn't lying when I saw his Federal Bureau of Investigation bodyguards. Story 45. I have never understood people who love the British royal family. They are nothing more than dependents who live off the state. It is amusing to me when people use the term working royals. None of them have done a real day's work in their lives. Story 46. I only liked the Queen. She was perfect and remained loyal to her duties. They are all truly awful people and racists, though. Story 47. I am submissive to degradation. I like thinking of myself as a dirty little plebeian. Yes, master, I will pay for the upkeep of your castle while I cannot afford to turn the heating on all winter. Story 48. Because I am English and they are part of our heritage. Also, if you send them a Christmas card, they will send one back. Story 49. As an American, I enjoy watching the pageantry of their weddings and funerals, but I am glad my tax dollars do not support it. Their lives seem somewhat silly. It is like watching a train wreck in slow motion. You know it is ridiculous, but you cannot look away. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.